Hello, and welcome to Speaking Frankly, where we feature honest talk with thought leaders across the advertising ecosystem and beyond. I am Kym Frank, Geopath President, and your host. I'm really excited today to be joined by my friend Pierre Bouvard. Pierre is the Chief Insights Officer at Cumulus Media Westwood One. So Pierre is a super well-known, super well-respected leader in the media industry. He's worked across tons of channels. He worked at TiVo, he worked at Nielsen, he worked at Arbitron. So Pierre, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So why don't we get started with you telling us a little bit about you, about your career, about your expertise?
Sure. So Kym, first of all, thanks for having me. And I am so excited to be at an out-of-home event. I have a very big place in my heart for out-of-home. In the early 2000s, a lady named Jacqueline Noel had this idea to start the out-of-home division at Arbitron. And so I was kind of the corporate mentor and loved every bit about the outdoor industry. So I'm excited to be on this thing. So I started off at Arbitron in training, and that led to sales and management roles. I then went to go work for a market research company for radio that did programming research. So I got to put some hip hop stations on in New York and LA, a lot of fun. And then I went back to Arbitron to run sales and launch something called the Portable People Meter, which was their kind of next generation measurement solution for the big markets. And then as you mentioned, went to TiVo at the dawn of the set-top box plus purchase data era. And I've been at Cumulus, Westwood One, a radio broadcaster and network for the past 5 years.
Great. So we often get asked how other channels are measured. Would you mind telling us a little bit about how radio is measured today?
Sure. So 2/3 to 3/4 of radio listening occurs away from home. So we're almost as out of home as out of home. So in the medium and the smaller markets, Nielsen uses a paper diary. It's a personal diary. Everyone in the household over the age of 12 gets their own diary. It's very simple. They just put in time, station, and place for each listening entry. And because it's a personal diary, it really works very elegantly. Even a 12-year-old can figure this out and fill it in. In the bigger markets, there's something called the Portable People Meter, which is a gizmo that clips to your purse or your belt, and it hears everything you hear. TV networks and radio stations put in inaudible code that it picks up. And there's a little motion detector in there, so it knows who's been naughty and nice, who's actually been carrying the device and not. And that's been in place in the bigger markets for about 10 years or so.
Great. So how often is it reporting? Is it, average minute? What does it look like? What do the metrics look like?
So it's polling, minute by minute data. It gets reported in the kind of the currency metric, which is the average quarter hour audience. But when we're doing sales effect studies, it'll go down to the minute. So we can say, here are the consumers that were exposed to the ad down to the minute, and then here's what they bought.
Got it. So what happens when they convert a market from a diary to a meter in the radio industry?
Yeah, there's a great kind of etched in stone lesson about audience measurement. Is the higher quality the audience measurement, the lower the ratings. So, right? So you go from DEC to the cool new thing, and the numbers are going to be smaller. When TV in the 80s went from, diaries to set meters, the ratings went down, but it was more high quality. When they went down to people meters, the ratings went down again. So anytime you go from a, hose in the road, write stuff down, remember stuff, to more electronic, the ratings get lower, but they get more accurate. And they get more credible. And I remember one of the first meetings 20 years ago, when I heard about the DEC, people said, "Oh yeah, we just take 20% of the number." I'm like, "Oh my God." So anyhow, so yes, the higher the quality, the lower the rating.
Got it. So I imagine that the radio industry has really been challenged with what's been going on with COVID. There were all of these stories like there's no one on the road, the cities are ghost towns that, you and I both know were completely not true. So what's the status of the radio industry? How have you been impacted?
Sure. So let's talk about content creation because we are in the entertainment industry. We have thousands of shows and disc jockeys and talk shows and this and that. The show has gone on, unlike Hollywood that basically sets were closed and productions were shut down. The radio industry quickly pivoted where kits were provided to air talent and producers, and shows were nimbly produced out of people's homes, and we're continuing to produce live and local programming. So we proved to ourselves that you don't necessarily need to be in a fancy studio, and we can create, quality content. No doubt, we are a retail industry, just like out of home locally. When your customers are shut down, that has a huge impact. And so second quarter was very challenging. Third quarter is better, and fourth quarter will be better than that. So we're definitely, coming off the bottom. And on a national basis, the election certainly helped. And a lot of the big brands kept advertising. The P&Gs, the insurance industry actually stepped up advertising by about 30%. So, but, the worst is behind us, but we're not out of the woods yet.
So I know you're a data guru, much like myself. Are there interesting resources you've been tapping into for data?
Sure. Well, one of them is Geopath. We have been making great use out of the miles travel data because there is this horrific misperception that I am a New York City media strategist in my apartment. Everyone in America is like me. No one's going to work. And that's the perception. The reality, of course, is completely different. And your data showed the drop in April, a fast recovery in May, and then continued recovery in June. And then basically, we are now exceeding prior year. The Apple Maps data, same thing. Drop April, May, sharp recovery. We're now exceeding prior year. The Federal Reserve did a study of folks in the job force pre-pandemic. A lot of people worked at home. Now the majority of Americans are back on the job out of home. So those have been, I think, very powerful for two reasons. One, it's big data. Two, it's current. So we're getting stuff from you guys and the Dallas Fed and Apple Maps continuously. So that has been really helpful to tell the story that, radio and Americans are back and they're in their car and they're on the road.
Great. I think you also mentioned when we spoke earlier, the Nielsen Consumer Tracker and some back to school studies that you'd been looking at.
Yeah, so Nielsen, in response to the pandemic, fielded a number of consumer studies. They did 3 in quick succession, April, May, June, and then they just did another one in early October. What they found on the school was half of American school children are back at school in some form. It could be full-time or hybrid. And so parents are having to wake up earlier in the morning and take the little sweeties to school. And in the car, what Nielsen found, not surprisingly, is the radio's on. So that was very comforting. The other thing that they found is that time spent in car, important to both our industries, has been rising sharply. So that's up like 63% time spent in car, October to the bottom in April.
Great. So taking those data sets and everything you have, at your fingertips, how is the radio industry pivoting to market itself, as we're, in the middle of or coming out of COVID?
Sure. So a couple of interesting things. We're distributed in a couple different forms, over the air, streaming, and podcasts. And interestingly, during the pandemic, streaming never faltered. Streaming is how people listen at work. And despite the fact that work transitioned to the home, streaming audiences were incredibly consistent. The other mega trend is that podcasting is on fire. and every major radio broadcaster has significant commitments to podcasting. And the CPMs are quadruple regular radio, and podcasting never missed a beat. And the IAB says podcast revenues will be up like 20% this year. So what we've done is we've leaned into some of these trends that were existing previously, streaming. We're selling digital packages as an industry mixed in with the over-the-air radio. And we're really focused on podcasting.
Great. So you said in our earlier conversation that one of the phrases, I guess, that you've been latching onto is take the me out of media. Can you tell me a little bit about taking the me out of media?
Sure. Our industry is interesting because nobody has to be certified in the facts of our industry. My wife is a physician, and every year she literally has to recertify basic knowledge and new knowledge of her industry to continue practicing medicine. Unfortunately, anybody can be a media strategist, a media planner or buyer with no certification, no need to actually know the facts of the industry. And so a lot of times what you end up doing is you just kind of fall on well, this is what I do. I live in New York and I don't have a car. So no one in America has a car or drives. So no one listens to radio or watches outdoor, and that's using a sample of one. And so the catchphrase is take the me out of media. You are not the market. You are a well-paid single urban dweller that lives in 2 or 3 cities. America is very different. And so it's important to look at the reality of the audience data. And we talked about your data and Nielsen, et cetera. And so advertiser perceptions, which is like the Nielsen of what advertisers think, did a perception study just in early October and asked anybody that touches a media budget, brands or agencies, hey, what % of Americans are driving to work every single day? The brands and the marketers and the agencies got it wrong by a factor of 2. There are actually twice as many people, 71%, regularly going to work every single day in America, Dallas Fed, versus the perception. So it just says, yes, you might not do this, Mr. and Mrs. Agency Media Planner, but look at America and take the me out of media.
I love that. Take the me out of media. Because we do see, right, there's certain markets that seem to be just life as usual across the country. And then there's others like us in New York area that have been severely impacted. So what kind of result has that had on like national versus local radio dollars?
So what's interesting is, even the media agency CEOs realize they have this issue. The CEO of Havas Media says the biggest problem radio has is the 26-year-old media planner who lives in New York, doesn't commute, have a car, and thinks, everybody listens to Spotify on the subway. So I think at a more senior level at the brands and the agencies, they're realizing, hey guys, you really have to look at the facts. You have to look at the data. And we as an industry have seen big brands kind of rediscover radio. For example, Procter & Gamble, after a 30-year absence on radio, is now back, and they are like the number 2 spender on radio. So we're getting rediscovered by big brands who need reach. And the TV reach is kind of leaking out of the media plan. The TV audience is aging. And if a brand cares about folks under the age of 60 and they need a lot of reach, well, out of home and, AM, FM radio. So we're kind of taking that story of P&G out. There's a media optimization platform that Nielsen has called Nielsen Media Impact. And we have really made a lot of hay with that platform because it shows you if you have a digital and TV buy and you reallocate 10 or 15% into radio, that the reach of their existing campaign can go up dramatically with no increase in spend.
Interesting. So what kind of innovation should we be keeping our eyes out for from the radio industry?
Well, there's a couple things coming Some of them are already here. One of them is what I call outdoor in the car. So every car now has that screen. And when you're playing a station, it'll show you the album cover, the title, and the artist. But that screen and that technology behind it has the ability to show a static visual associated with an ad. And so we have advertisers that are now paying extra to have that visual light up with their logo or their offer or some words on a screen. So look for that to really become kind of mass appeal. And not surprisingly, when you add a visual to an audio ad, recall, awareness, interest, and consideration go through the roof. The other interesting innovation is zone casting. There's a technology that permits broadcasters to have different content, whether it's a traffic report or a news report or an ad, in different parts of town. And it's through a technology that leverages repeaters and transmitters and stuff, but you don't need a special radio for it. And so that's going to give a retailer the ability to say, well, I'm only on Long Island, so I just want my ad out here. I don't necessarily need Connecticut and New Jersey to hear it. So that is being piloted as we speak, and a lot of excitement from agencies and advertisers for that.
Great, fabulous, really interesting. So when it comes to like programmatic or more automated or addressable radio ads being served, where is radio in terms of addressability and automation and buying along those lines?
Sure. So podcasting and streaming, because they're both digital delivery, we are there. So there is a robust audio programmatic market. There's robust data-driven targeting and addressability going on. And as I mentioned, for over the air, I think zone, is going to be probably what our focus is going to be, because you still need reach. One of the things that we have gotten overly enamored with in media is targeting. And Nielsen did a major study looking at sales drivers. And the sales drivers are creative, reach, targeting, context, brand. And the number one sales driver with a bullet is creative. And number two is reach. And reach is 2.5 times more important than targeting. So yes, targeting is useful and helpful, but reach is what actually drives sales in a big way. And in fact, one of the godfathers of marketing effectiveness, Les Binet, says, tight targeting means low sales and profits for the brand. So if you want high sales and profits, you go for mass reach.
Yeah, it's funny. I think we've cut the top of the funnel off, right? We've gotten so lower funnel focused because of the ability to hyper target in online channels that we've lost the sight of driving awareness and all of those upper funnel metrics that are so important.
Yeah, over the weekend, I just read this study from Analytic Partners called Omni-Channel and a Brave New World. And one of the big findings of their media mix modeling study is that offline media drive the majority of digital impact. So out of home, TV, radio, which is mid upper funnel, is what creates the sales effect.
Great. Well, I'm going to have to dig up all of these great studies you have access to, Pierre. You seem like a really fantastic resource.
I spend way too much time on LinkedIn.
Well, great. So I have my speaking frankly question. So speaking frankly, Pierre, if you could put one message out to the world on out-of-home advertising today, what would it be?
I would have a board in Lower Manhattan, right outside Publicis and OMD and Group M, and it would say, take the me out of media.
Oh, I love it. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Pierre. It was really great hearing from you. If any of our listeners have any questions, they can email us at geekout@geopath.org. You can put Speaking Frankly questions right in the subject line, and then we'll know it's about the podcast. So looking forward to hearing from everybody next time. Thanks again, Pierre.
Thanks so much.